This week, the winds of change come into your life because this week we have the North Node ingressing into Pisces and the South Node ingressing into Virgo, which is going to mean that the eclipses will be happening in the signs of Pisces and Virgo for the next year and a half. So that's going to be March of 25, September of 25, all the way into March of 2026. And this shift in the astrology is very subtle, but it's going to compound with other transits that are going on at the very end of Pisces, which is Saturn at the end of Pisces, Neptune at the end of Pisces before they ingress into Aries. We will have a Venus retrograde at the beginning of Pisces and a Mercury retrograde at the beginning of Pisces. So all of a sudden this week, there's a lot shifting towards that last 10 degrees of Pisces. And there's a lot to talk about with it. So let's go ahead and get started talking about this week. Welcome back to the Astrology Report, this time for January 6th through January 12th of 2025. My name is Cam White. If you don't know me already, I'm a professional astrologer. I've been doing this for almost a decade. I have literally hundreds of videos. I've seen thousands of clients, and my job is to let you know what is going on in the universe and how to best handle it and use it to your advantage. This week is the cold plunge that I really was kind of referencing last week, and that really sets off the rest of January. And again, now that we're in 2025, the spring of this year is when everything gets crazy, and it pretty much starts now, even though it's very subtle. So let's go ahead and get started talking about it. So we start Monday off, at midnight with Mars retrograde going back into Cancer, retrogressing back into Cancer. So that's our first highlight of the week, and we started off pretty much right at midnight on Monday. And then our second highlight of the week is Mercury's making a square to Neptune, also really early on Monday morning. And then the moon will be making a sextile to Jupiter throughout the day. Now, what's this all about? Monday really does have a different vibe to it. With Mars retrogressing back into Cancer, I want you to really think about September and October, because those were the months that Mars was in Cancer. Mars is energy and drive and fights and conflicts. And Cancer is the sign that Mars has fallen in. It doesn't do that well, and it's very protective. It's very defensive. It's very emotional. But I want you to think, what rising sign are you? And what house was Mars transiting for you in September and October? And what issues and what problems did you experience in that area of your life during September and October? Because as Mars goes back into there, it's about addressing those issues. We weren't able to solve those issues right then and there. So now we have to solve those issues. And they're not comfortable. They're not that fun. Mars doesn't like to go retrograde out of all the planets. Mars is about moving forward, and it literally goes retrograde the least. But as Mars is retrograde, it's also going to be in its worst sign to be in, which is Cancer. So this is just all bad in terms of dignity scheme stuff. In terms of basic astrology, Mars does not have access to any resources or powers that it needs to get its job done. So if Mars is about fights and conflicts and energy and drive, there's a lot of hey, we actually have to protect. We actually have to defend. We actually have to not do a lot of that stuff. But as Mars is retrograding back into Cancer, what I really look at is there's going to be this kind of insecurity mode being brought in. Mars and Leo is kind of easy to be a little bit more I want you to really think about, how did you feel between September and October? Did you feel more confident and more proud and loud in November when Mars moved into Leo? And I want you to think about that discrepancy. Think about the differences that you felt. Because as Mars goes retrograde back into Cancer, it's really not going to feel all that good. But this is kind of like having to do the deep internal work that we don't really want to address, but that's really going to get us to the next area. Again, you get a cut on your leg. It gets infected. You don't want to go to the hospital. You don't want to deal with all that stuff, but you have to. Otherwise, you're going to lose it. And it doesn't feel good to do any of this stuff. It hurts to pour I don't even know what you pour on a wound anymore. Is it hydrogen peroxide or is it alcohol? I don't fucking know anymore. Pouring that on, it stings, it hurts, but that's what you have to do to heal the wound. As Mars goes retrograde back into Cancer, we're going to want to squirm. We're going to want to avoid it. We're not going to want to look at it right in the face, and it's going to be difficult as well. Well, the one thing I wanted to put on this too, because I wanted to read the notes I wrote. The two things I wrote for this Mars retrograde back into Cancer is a lot of the deep work begins, and there's really no more hiding. Mars is going to be here until about April. So you might have thought that the Mars retrograde's been so bad. We haven't even got started with it yet. Once it goes back into Cancer, where it's going to be for the majority of the time, now we're here in the Mars retrograde. Now we're doing the deep work. Now, why Mars retrograde in Leo? Why were we losing confidence? Oh, Mars retrograde back into Cancer. Oh, it's because some weird, stupid childhood wound. That's the problem. That's 90% of the problem. Some weird, deep childhood wound that you crisscross some wires as an adult, and now it doesn't work anymore, and you got to do something different. That's pretty much 90% of everyone's problems. But Mars retrograde in Cancer is saying oh, actually this is a really fucked up little wound that we have to kind of heal and do something with, or at least just change. So there's really no hiding anymore, especially with Mars and Leo, right? Mars and Leo is very performative. It's very, let me put myself out there. And there's times where that can come from raw, genuine authenticity. And there's also times where it comes from insecurity. And it's just tomfoolery. It's just clownish. And that Mars retrograde back into Cancer is really asking, hey, if you want to put yourself out there, if you want to have confidence, it can't be faked. It has to be integral. It has to be authentic. And that Mars retrograde back into Cancer is really asking you, are you that guy? Are you that guy on an emotional level? Not on a, everyone wants to be great. Everyone wants to do all these great things, but are you actually that person internally? And if not, what do we need to change on the inside to be that? That's what this is about. That's what this is about from January all the way through February, all the way through March. We've got 3 more months of dealing with that. And that starts this week. So like the deep work has not even started with Mars. Like the Mars retrograde in Leo was just kind of us being like, whoa, what's going on? Like something's happening. Now we're looking under the hood and we're seeing what the issue is. Now, we also have Mercury making a square to Neptune as our highlight. To be honest with you, this would be so much worse had Mercury not retrograded already. With Mercury retrograding in detriment opposite Jupiter, its ruler in detriment while it's ruled by Mercury, and there was that opposition. That was so all over the place that it almost makes the Mercury-Neptune square to me nothing, because that's pretty much what it's been for the past month. But what I wanted to read, because I wrote this down, was you're going to be confused. Mercury is out of shadow at this point, right? But it's still in detriment in Sag. Mercury is all about, again, like our mind, thoughts, plans, like very rational part of our minds, right? But it's in detriment in Sagittarius. It's we're thinking about like the dream and the vision and the goal, and it's hard to wrap our minds around. And as Mercury's in Sagittarius, it squares Neptune, which Neptune is about the vision. Like Neptune is also illusion and fantasy and deception. And you realize, oh, am I being deceived here? Am I not seeing things the way that I want to see them? Am I is the thing that I'm trying to create, did I create it and did it not look the way that I expected to? And the thing that I wrote down that I wanted to talk about, because you have to compound Mercury squaring Neptune with Mars, which you're getting back into Cancer, is I feel like there's some sort of a confusion, some sort of a misunderstanding of the situation that's going to make you want to quit. Like January 6th is for quitters. This is a really easy day to quit. I feel like every day is really easy to quit, to be honest with you. But this is a day where if you go into it without, again, if you think everything in life is going to be easy and you're not going to get challenges, like you're fucking, like you absolutely do not live in reality whatsoever. There's always going to be challenges. And it's up to you whether or not you have the strength and the resiliency to look at challenges as nothing. You have dealt with a challenge before in your life. And I genuinely mean this. You have dealt with something in your life that was so easy for you that really wasn't that big of a deal. That is someone else's biggest deal that they could ever go through, ever. And you overcome that. You were like, that's nothing. That's not even that big of a deal. But it could be the other way around. You have something that is such a big deal to you that everyone else just does with ease. And I'm saying all this to say that it's going to be easy to quit, but you have to understand, you have to have that strength and that resiliency to keep moving forward. And on this day in particular, you're going to get really overwhelmed with your mind. You're going to be like, oh my God, what's possible here? What's possible there? What happens if this happens? And then Mars is going to go back into Cancer where we're going to get all insecure with our feelings. You cannot give up here. But this is where the magic happens. When it gets to that breaking point, when it gets to that point where you can either break down or break through. A lot of breakthroughs happened this week with the sun trending Uranus at the very end of this week, which we'll get to. But I wanted to bring this up for a Monday. Now, the other part of this, though, with Mars retrograding in Cancer and Mercury squaring Neptune, is like you have to the confusion will be a mechanism for self-defense, and you kind of have to like rip out that disease of like, okay, again, coming back to that cleaning analogy, there's a lot of ripping out a disease here that you don't even want to acknowledge is there. Now, I will say the moon is going to be making a sextile to Jupiter while it's in Aries. We have the energy on Monday. We have the ambition. It's really just about not losing focus. And even though it's going to be hard, going through it anyway. Now we get to Tuesday, and on Tuesday, the moon is going to make a trine to Mercury and then make a square to Mars. The moon then ingresses into Taurus and squares Pluto. And then the moon sextiles Venus. So the lunar transits on Tuesday are really interesting, and it's only lunar transits. The moon, while it's in Aries, is going to make a trine to Mercury in Sagittarius. So this is like really quick mental stuff. Like, the moon is in Aries. We're really emotionally invested into our actions. And the moon is trining Mercury in Sag. We're like, yeah, we're going to do this. We're going to do that. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. But the moon is going to make a square to Mars in Cancer, where we can't do those things. It reminds me of moving back to Vegas. The traffic patterns here are so different compared to Denver. But it's like in Vegas, you're either hitting every light green and it takes 10 minutes to go somewhere, or you hit every light red and it takes 40 minutes to hit the light somewhere. And it's like, you can be ambitious about going somewhere or doing this, but what does traffic say about that? The moon in Aries making a square to Mars retrograding Cancer is our emotions, our day-to-day emotions kind of take precedence with a lot of things. And it's in Aries, right? Like we want to take some action. We want to be aggressive. But that Mars in Aries squaring Mars, the moon in Aries squaring Mars retrograding Cancer reminds me of being a kid and wanting to like be aggressive. Cause like, let's say someone hurt you or they bullied you and you wanted to be mean back, but you don't understand pain and all. And like, you kind of end up doing something really fucked up, like really mean, maybe a little bit more harsh than you were anticipating, but you just didn't know better. Like the moon in Aries squaring Mars retrograding Cancer is like the actions that we take, like it's just not working out the way that we planned it to. And they're kind of rough. It kind of gets botched, if that makes sense. But the other part is the moon in Aries squaring Mars retrograding Cancer is like we have all this emotional investment to do it, but oh my God, have you ever just like know you needed to do something, but you just resisted it? I had this moment before I left Denver where I was so hungry and I was just brain rotting on my phone on the couch, and I just refused to get up. I was like, I don't even want to make a decision about what I want to eat. I don't even want to go up and go anywhere, but I was starving. It's kind of like that. It's like this like paralyzing inaction. We don't want to do the work that we have to do. We don't want to push ourselves that way. So there's a part of Tuesday that's really frustrating emotionally. But then as the moon goes into Taurus, things chill. The moon's going to go into Taurus, which is about being comfortable and chilling. It's going to square Pluto, which like I'm kind of over talking about the moon going into Taurus squaring Pluto. Because in my opinion, there's just a level of it that's like not as important on a day-to-day level to talk about it in a personal development sense. Now, the moon in Scorpio squaring Pluto, I feel like that can be exacerbated, but the moon being exalted squaring Pluto, it's like the moon's exalted. Let's not worry about Pluto. But the reason I bring that up is the moon goes into Taurus. Sure, it squares Pluto, but the moon's going to make a sextile to Venus. The moon is exalted. Venus is exalted. They're making a sextile to one another. Coming back to like how I think I talked about this last week of like, there was a moon Venus conjunction that was really nice and soft. This is also there. There's a lot of pleasure and, beautiful, like this is again, very like charcuterie board in the park, picnic, going slow, enjoying things as they are, trying new foods, being open to stuff. Now, what does that all have to do with what we're doing with our lives? Tuesday morning is going to make you feel like you need to go really fast and you need to take all this aggressive action. And a lot of the times it may not necessarily be this aggressive action you have to do. And it might be having to be like slow down and enjoying things. And like, rather than again, quality over quantity. And I would argue that quantity is more important than quality a lot of the time. But this is a time to really kind of like say, all right, well, we're slowing down anyway. We're not going to go that fast anyway, right? You're stuck in traffic anyway. Why not listen to some music? Why not listen to the podcast you've been wanting to catch up on? Why not, turn it all off and just get deep in your thoughts? That's kind of the vibe as we get into Tuesday evening. And I really do like Tuesday evening for the moon Venus sextile. It's going to be really enjoyable. Now we get to Wednesday though. And on Wednesday is when Mercury ingresses into Capricorn. Look, I can't even begin to describe how excited I am for this. Fuck that Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius. I would still argue the Mercury retrograde in Virgo into Leo was worse. But this was just so like, I'm done. And I like Mercury in Capricorn. Mercury is about logistics and plans and our thoughts. And Capricorn is literally about like structure. Capricorn is just mostly really about structure at the end of the day. Old traditional way of doing things. If there was a transit that's like mentally locking in, it is Mercury in Capricorn. It is like, what is our plan? How are we going to get to, we are at point A. How do we get to point B? What is our contingency for point B? What is our pace plan for point B? All of this is more of a mental focus on what must be done. And I think that's really nice after a month and a half of Mercury and Sagittarius just being like all over the place and mentally frazzled. We finally have an opportunity. And again, the other thing that I would talk about with this is the sun first went into there is kind of this order of operations of things slowly moving to Capricorn. Things are slowly getting a little bit more serious. And now Mercury's catching up. And now it's like, now that we're in a point in our lives that I feel a little bit more calm, a little bit more settled, a little bit more chill, Mercury comes in where it's like, now we have a time and a place to focus, if that makes sense. Now, there's a lot less distraction going on, but the moon is also then going to make a sextile to Saturn. And on Wednesday, it just seems really focused on like locking in, creating a plan, sticking to the plan, really just doing work on Wednesday, which I think is really nice. But imagine doing work without over the past 2 months, the thinking about how you're going to go visit your parents for the holidays, what you're going to get this person for Christmas, what about this, what about that. All of that's done now, and we can just really focus. So that's the magic about Wednesday, is just focusing on the work. They're just being, it's not that crazy. It's very simple. And in my opinion, as the moon is in Taurus, making a sextile to Pisces, it's almost relaxing to get quiet and to get focused and to get streamlined and to just have a basic day at your office or at your job, whatever it is. That's what Wednesday is good for. Now we get to Thursday. Now, mind you, I'm about to go off about the nodes moving into Pisces and Virgo here in a second, but we're building up to that. So I just want to make sure you remember why you're here, because we're going to get into that. But the moon on Thursday is going to conjoin Uranus. It's then going to sextile Neptune. The moon will then make a sextile to Mars, because the moon will be at the end of Taurus, and it's going to make a sextile to Mars at the end of Cancer. And then the moon goes into Gemini and trines Pluto. Thursday, it's just a normal day in my opinion. The moon's going to conjoin Uranus and sextile Neptune. Again, some sort of a disruption, some sort of a breakthrough. It's the moon in Taurus, where it's like, I don't know, maybe you're expecting to eat this nice meal, and my dad was a firefighter. I've talked a lot about that, and it's like a joke in the fire department where, like, right when everyone sits down to eat a meal, they get a call and they gotta go. Like, that's kind of like moon and Taurus conjoining Uranus. Then the moon makes a sextile to Mars, though. And the moon making a sextile to Mars is really interesting to me, because the moon is exalted, right? It's about our body, it's about our emotions, and it's in Taurus, it's slow and it's chill, and it's sextiling Mars in Cancer, where it's like, it reminds me of like a kid, when a kid is having a really tough time with something, and they're like, let's say, you see like a kid trying to play a sport with other kids, and they're crying, they're upset, and it's too much of a wild environment for them to calm down. Like, sometimes they need to go sit in the car for a minute, or like, and not time out like they're punished, but like, just, hey, like, everything's a little all over the place. How can we chill out a little bit? Like, draw with some crayons or eat fruit snacks, whatever the fuck. The moon sextiling Mars, in my opinion, just seems like this is our first contact with Mars, with the moon, this week so far. And that doesn't even happen until Thursday. I'm just, no, my bad. The moon makes a square to Mars. The moon in Aries makes a square to Mars, but then the moon sextiles Mars. So that moon Mars square on Tuesday sucks, but this is kind of like okay, how can we work with that energy a little bit more? How can we, again, cure the disease, focus on what's going on with the disease in a calm, timely manner? Again, maybe that just means slowing down, being a little bit more focused on what's going on inside. Now, that lasts for 5 minutes, because then the moon goes into Gemini and then trines Pluto. The moon going into Gemini and trining Pluto is, in my opinion, a burst of information. There's like, all of a sudden, info comes in. Have you ever done anything different that was maybe unorthodox to maybe how you would typically do something? You did it. It worked, and then all of a sudden your mind just starts going a million miles an hour because you just figured out all of this stuff. It reminds me of the moon going from Taurus to Gemini, especially the first decan of Gemini, reminds me of the forbidden fruit, the fruit of knowledge, where it's like you eat the fruit and then all of a sudden you just know a bunch of stuff. But it's also like, a glucose response, where it's like after you eat a carbohydrate, you get all this energy and you're all inspired until you crash. That's kind of like the moon going from Taurus into Gemini. So there's kind of all this like mental stimulation going on Thursday. I think on Thursday it's just lunar transits. It's nothing crazy. But why I wanted to, what I really want you guys to walk away with on Thursday is, hey, there's a little disruption. We'll figure out some solutions to the bigger problems, and then it's kind of like all energy after that. But then we get to Friday. Friday is a little bit funny to me, because on Friday the moon is going to make a sextile. The moon is going to make a square to Venus. So the moon's in Gemini, squaring Venus, conjoining Jupiter, squaring Saturn. When I first wrote this down, I can only think of a not safe for work analogy. There's a time to be rough with a woman, and there's a time to be soft and gentle. And this is kind of like really mismatch, like not reading the vibe. Like the moon in Gemini conjoining Jupiter in Gemini is like very loud and obnoxious, but the moon's squaring Venus, like that. There's like a turnoff to that, right? The moon and or like, for example, like, I'm trying to keep it PG here. I'm trying to keep it somewhat age appropriate. There's no fucking kids watching this. I would argue, though, if you can think of in your mind a situation in which pleasure and fun would be the main topic of focus, but noises and talking and what is being said kind of kills the vibe. Does that make sense? The moon squaring Venus, the moon in Gemini squaring Venus it also just reminds me of like being in a movie theater and then just like people talking. There's like this disruption. Let's say you're taking a nice bath. If you're a mother, you're taking a nice bath, you're relaxing, and then I don't know, maybe you have a husband who has like a torque wrench that he's got, he's taking something apart in his car. Torque wrenches are loud as fuck. And so just like it squares your shit. Like it squares your Venus. Like the moon's squaring. It's like you're trying to relax, but there's some sort of loud noise. The whole thing on Friday is like, there's not enough central, like the central energy is there, but there's something wrong about it. And you need to be a little bit more quiet. Those are the things I wrote down. Like the moon in Gemini conjoining Jupiter is like, here's all this information. Here's all this. But like, it's kind of getting in the way of the peace. It's kind of getting in the way of what we're trying to sulk into. And so Friday is just frustrating in and of itself. I think with that, it's really confusing on what to do. But then we get to Saturday. Here's the thing on Saturday. This is the big highlight this week. So the moon's going to be in Gemini. It's going to make a square to Neptune. Both the nodes, because the nodes are like one thing. The north node will move into Pisces and the south node moves into Virgo. And the moon will make a square to the nodes before it moves into Cancer. Look, here's what's going on. Here's the fucking reality of this. The north node is the thing that is pulling us into a certain direction. It is what we're hyper-focused on. What, in a lot of the ways, the reason I say that the winds of change happens is if you're on my website, if you're on my memberships, I talked about this in the game plan. And I probably talked a lot about this in the rising sign horoscopes, which as of me recording, I haven't actually recorded yet. So I don't know what I'm going to talk about. But this is a lot about like air pressure change. When a storm is coming in and you can smell the air being different, you can smell water coming into the air. That's what this is. Now, it's not just the north node going into Pisces. It's the north node pretty much conjoining Neptune. And the south node, which is draining and exhausting. The south node is like, ugh, like this isn't working. It's not happening. It's not exciting. And it's going into Virgo. Virgo is about, again, analysis, data, information, organization. And the way I'm going to really talk about this time is enough of the citing of the sources, enough of the fucking data, enough of this reality, this fucking reality that we live in where everyone's like, well, where's the scientific proof of that? Well, where's this or that? This materialist worldview is going to literally go away. It's not going to work anymore. If you are saying, you know what, if I just, cross all of my T's and dot all of my I's, maybe I'll make it there. No, you have to play big. The north node conjoining Neptune is going to reward those who have dissolved every expectation that they've had and have just went straight for the thing that they want to go for. The north node conjoining conjoining Neptune and Pisces is literally being delusional. And not in a way of like, oh, like, I'm going to literally jump off this cliff and fly. But it's one of those things of pursuant of a vision, pursuant of an ideal, and letting go of things. For example, you have things in your life that you want to have, right? But like if you sit down and you try to be rational, you're going to be like, well, I don't know if I can get this. And, maybe I won't be able to have that. Like, that's not what this time is for. Like the South Node in Virgo is like, who gives a fuck about what you're organizing or what makes sense or what studies have shown. Fuck all of that noise. And if you're one of those people too, it's really the worst thing that you can do. Like who gives a shit about your silly little studies? It's all bankrupt. It's all corrupt anyway. It's all of it's corrupt. Why aren't we understanding what the truth is anymore? Like the north node going into Pisces, I've been thinking about this. It's like the north node going into Pisces on top of Neptune is very delusion, right? Like we're just going towards the delusion. But Pisces also ultimately at the end of the day represents the truth. It also represents the truth. You have to think the nodes retrogress. They move backwards through the zodiac, counter to what we typically see the planets move through. So they're moving backwards, right? The north node goes from 0 Aries to 29 Pisces. What is 29 Pisces? That's the final degree. That's the last degree before you jump into the new part of the zodiac, right? Before, this spring begins. And so there's this kind of like ultimate look at, again, like what is the actual truth? What is actually going on? Why have I been so if you've been watching my content for any time, I've been talking a lot about World War III is happening, right? But also live your dreams and go for everything. And that sounds kind of like, what? Like, what am I talking about? So let's say World War III happens, right? Which just this next 5 years is going to be really crazy around the world with war stuff. Why aren't you doing here's the at the end of the day, you're probably not going to get bombed. You're probably not going to die. You're probably going to be fine. But here's a question. Let's say you do get bombed. Let's say you live in New York City and there's going to be a nuke that goes off. Would you rather die? Would you rather die living an existence that you fucking hate? Would you rather die living an existence of regret? Or would you rather die at least trying to do the thing that you want to do while you can? Like, I've just been so deeply ingrained in this where I've thought about the war stuff. I kind of turned into a prepper and I'm still somewhat, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really fucking matter. Nothing really matters. I mean, you're going to be fine. But I come back to me even prepping is like this like cope of me not living my dreams. So I come back to like, well, if let's say worst case scenario, everyone dies, which is, that's not going to happen. How would I rather die? I'd rather die doing the things like this has just made me come face to face with my own mortality in a really weird way. And, that's why I've been pushing on this. And so with the North Node going into Pisces and the South Node going into Virgo, like stop looking for fucking answers. The answer is inside of yourself. You're not going to find the answers to life and meaning. And you, by going, like you have it inside of your soul. You don't even need to understand half of the shit that you want to understand. You just need to do the thing that you need to do. You just need to believe. Like the South Node, like the North Node in Pisces is genuinely like, you have to believe it. You have to believe it. I love magic. And I'm not talking about like Wicca, fucking pagan, astro magic. I'm talking like I love sleight of hand illusion magic. You know why? Because it's just one of those things where I like to believe it. Do I think they're superhuman? No, but I like seeing it. And it completely takes my imagination by storm. I think, and I'm like, how the fuck did they do this? I'm saying all that to say, like, for the people that are like, oh, that's not real. That's just an illusion. It's like, yeah, no fucking shit. But how are they doing it? Do you know how? Like, is it still not insanely impressive? Does it still not fill you with whimsy? Does it not make you get more in touch with your inner child? And so I look at like this is a wind shift. The North Node was in Aries for the past year and a half, which was about raw action, confronting things, attacking things. War was the focus. The South Node's in Libra. Peace was never an option. Now the North Node's in Pisces and the South Node's in Virgo. It is like the spiritual woo-woo shit. That's what's going to be of attention. And this whole like, oh, well, actually, science says that's for the fucking birds. And why am I saying it this way? I'm saying it this way because when it comes to your day-to-day life, I want you to start trusting. I don't want you to look at your reality and look at your world and only see what is blocking you. I don't even want you to look. I want you to be blindfolded. Like, what would it look like to go through your life? Let's say you've got goals, you got dreams, ambitions, whatever it is. What if you went through those blindfolded? Meaning whatever scary monsters were in front of you, you didn't see and you just kept going forward anyway. That's what I want you to do during this time. But this is that subtle shift because we're not even in eclipse season yet. We don't have anything going on. This is just the subtle shift where I think you're going to wake up on Saturday. You're going to go, oh, I see where things are changing. I see where things are going. I see what I need to be putting into. And the thing is, the North Node going into Pisces, it's like it immediately starts conjoining Neptune. We're going to start getting really delusional here. And I want to ask you, what are you going to be delusional about? Are you going to be delusional about, hey, you know what? The things that I want in my life, I'm going to be able to get them. I don't give a fuck what anyone fucking says. I don't give a fuck what my parents say. I don't give a fuck what my friends say. I don't give a fuck what my partner says. I don't give a fuck what my boss says. I'm going to do all these things. Are you going to be like that? Or are you going to be delusional thinking, everyone's out for me. My life sucks. I'll never accomplish anything. And which one are you going to be? Which one? If you're on my channel, if you're watching me, I refuse to believe you are the latter. I think deep down you want to be the former. I think deep down you are the former. However, it's just a matter of, have you accepted that yet? So I look at a lot of this as a trust fall. I look at a lot of this as, hey, the vibe's changing. The vibe changed. The vibe's done. The vibe's different. So when you're at a party and the vibe changes, do you leave? Do you change the vibe? Do you recognize that the vibe is different? And how do we act on that? The vibe's different now. Now it's time to do something different. And this is, again, in my opinion, this is another domino in the scheme, the bigger scheme of things that is really getting us into this huge change that starts this spring. And I really think this is kind of like a big ticker. So the moon will then square the nodes. The problem with this on Saturday is that with the moon and Gemini squaring the nodes is it's just kind of like not expected. It's not anticipated. Like the moon and Gemini is all about information that squares nodes immediately when the nodes ingress. So it's kind of like this like, whoa, I didn't see that happening. Or like maybe it's like a level of like autism where you're just not reading the room right. Where you're like, wait, what just happened? That's kind of the vibe. But then the moon goes into Cancer, which is again, fine. I would just argue there's a lot of pivot. There's a pivot point. This is realizing that things are different, that things are shifting, and that's what's going on. Now we get to Sunday. The moon is going to be in Cancer. It's going to go opposite Mercury in Capricorn. It will then trine Venus and Saturn. And then we have two highlights on Sunday, which is Mars being retrograde is going to make a trine to Neptune, and the sun is going to make a trine to Uranus, which is our second highlight. So The moon in Cancer opposite Mercury in Capricorn is really about like balancing management of resources, right? Like the moon in Cancer is like, I have a budget for, like, let's say you're in charge of a company and you guys got a budget for advertising and marketing. So that's the moon in Cancer. I have these resources. It's going to go opposite Mercury in Capricorn, where it's like you can't give all of your money to every little tiny thing, right? You have to balance resources with, you know, plans, with structure. You can't use all, like, again, like that, the Capricorn Cancer axis is like abundance of resources and management of resources, if that makes sense. Like, hey, moon in Cancer, we got milk from the cow. Okay, how do we make this milk last? Can we, like, you make milk, you make heavy cream, you make butter, you make all these other things to make it last a long time. That's the Cancer Capricorn axis. And so there's this kind of like feeling on Sunday that is like, again, just like really basic management of resources. Like, okay, here's what I have. How do I balance it with everything else? But, and then the moon will make a trine to Venus and Saturn. You're going to make it all work. It's going to, like, you have resources is what I would look at this as. And the moon will trine Venus. Moon in Cancer trining Venus and Pisces, hot and steamy to me. But Mars, being retrograde, is going to trine Neptune. I don't know how to feel about this, to be honest with you guys. I don't know how I feel about this, because think about it. If Mars is action and drive, if we just think Mars trining Neptune, it's like our actions are being assisted intensely by creative perception, or possibly we are being deceived. The actions we are taking are being assisted by deception, or the actions that we are taking, the things that are angering us are being elevated by deception or by illusion. But it's Mars fallen, so Mars isn't doing all that good, and it's retrograde. It's moving backwards. Part of me is almost kind of like looking back is like, what were you being deceived by? Like Mars retrograde in Cancer is so like again, like hurt emotions, hurt, you know, like insecurities, and it's going to try Neptune, where it's either like, hey, you can be like, wow, my insecurities are so bad that I'm going to be paralyzed with fear. Or you could even look at it as like, where am I being deceived about my own emotions? You know what I've been really, you know, when I share things with you guys, I don't want to say I hate this. It sucks sometimes being in this position, because I wish I could express the level of magnitude of something when I say it. Like, you know, it's been really hitting me. And when I say hitting me, like, this is stuff I've always heard. I've heard this I'm almost 30 years old. I've heard this before my whole life. But just now, is it really hitting me? It's just like, emotions aren't real. They're not real. They're not. The moon rules emotions. Hey, changes every 2.5 days. Why? We choose to live emotionally, but they're not real. Think about your spouse. One day you love them. One day you hate them. That's not fucking real. It changes. It changes all the time. It changes based off of both real things and not real things. Your emotions about someone changes based off of a lie you can receive. So I say all that to say, when we base everything off of emotions, we're choosing to live a life that is inherently chaotic, that is inherently false, because your emotions can change about a subject. The worst thing in your life, if you're going through the worst part of your life right now, I guarantee in 10 years, you're going to look back and you're like, that actually wasn't all that bad. I'm glad I went through it. You know, it taught me this and this and this and that. So it's how we feel. It doesn't actually really matter about something. And so I look at Mars retrograde trine Neptune is really looking at like, what are the things that we like, where do our emotions stop us? Where do we lie to ourselves with our emotions? How much do they deceive us? How much are we wrapped up in the story and the narrative that we tell ourselves about our emotions? Now, I think Mars retrograde in Cancer trining Neptune is like kind of good for creative stuff. I don't really know, but I just feel like there's this kind of like really deep look at like, where am I gaslighting myself about my emotions and my feelings? And the nice thing is the sun trines Uranus is the last highlight. There's a breakthrough available. There is a inspirational, creative insight that is going to come by Sunday evening. Next week, we have the full moon in Cancer, which is conjoining Mars, Venus squaring Jupiter, which is interesting. We have the halfway point of the Mars retrograde, which is the Sun-Mars opposition. We have Venus conjoining Saturn, Mercury sextiling both Venus and Saturn, and we have the Sun ingressing into Aquarius all next week. Guys, we're dick deep now into 2025. We are dick deep into the major changes that are happening this spring. It's already started. The movie already began. The movie's happening. You are in the middle of your life right now. It's happening right now. Make sure you guys subscribe to the channel. I'll be seeing you next week.